Shout out to Snowball, our incredible new sponsor, a private community where top entrepreneur investors share private deal flow, wins, tough lessons, strategies, get advice, and so much more. Check out www.snowballclub.com. Let's grow together with Snowball. Hello, and welcome to the How2Exit Podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. And now a moment for our sponsors. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Hello and welcome to the How2Exit Podcast. Today I'm here with Reid Tileston, and we're going to talk about everything mergers and acquisitions, buying and selling companies, and what that means. Thank you for being here today, Reid.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. We always start off with the origin story, the joke everybody's sick of hearing. It's like you were born and then you ended up on a show about mergers and acquisitions. How in the hell did you end up here? So like, give us your background, man. Tell us, and I read about it. It looks pretty cool. So tell us who you are and how you ended up here.
Well, you want to know the real origin story is that late 1970s in Palo Alto, so not too far from where you are, my dad and his first cousin were at the starting line of a running race. It was a hot day and they were dressed in their 70s attire, short shorts, tank tops, all kinds of body hair. They were worried about chafing. Okay. So they had like a big bottle of Vaseline and they're lubing up their inner armpits, inner thighs, and their nipples to avoid chafing. No joke, Ron. My mother comes up and was like, my future mother was like, "Hey guys, I forgot my Vaseline at home. Can I borrow some of yours?" So I'm like the child of two Northern California hippie runner people. And then I was out at San Francisco's second oldest pub on Battery Street in 2007 called the Old Ship Saloon. It's pretty cool, Ron. They have a mast outside of the pub that was from a ship that sunk during the gold rush. So pretty cool stuff. At the time, I was 23 years old. I'd gone to UC Berkeley undergrad. I was working in finance and had $100,000 saved up, right, through my
Yeah.
work. It was a good situation. I was working at this trend-setting venture capital private equity firm called Industry Ventures. They now, by the way, have like 1.3 billion under management. Back then, it was like 30 million. So they've done some good growth. I was out with two private equity pros that were looking at acquiring franchisors. They were looking at Anytime Fitness in particular. At that point in my life, I just wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I loved industry ventures. I just didn't really want to be a spreadsheet jockey. I was very much like an on the ground, hands on kind of individual. And also, my parents might run a marathon, so I like fitness. So as they were talking about these opportunities, they were looking at the franchise locations and how they were performing. And became pretty clear that these seems to be a really good financial return. So long story short, we ended up partnering. I ended up leaving my job in San Francisco, kept, of course, my finance salary I was going to keep. So it all was good. We had a third equity and I went out into the California Central Valley and opened up a fitness club in Sacramento in December 2007, right when the Great Recession began. That's when I had my core identity that I was, because at that point, I was what I'll call an equity employee. I didn't control the business. I had good equity upside in it, but there were three partners. That's when I had my identity that I'm a business owner, because what I did to have that club make money is I dressed up in a purple superhero suit called Captain Running Man, pounded the pavement, as you can appreciate, in like the 95-degree Sacramento summer heat, got the club to make a couple $1,000 a month, which is not a great ROI or a great IRR for me or the partners. But I learned so many lessons about how to run a business, how to choose a site, the whole 9 yards, that I was able to go out on my own during the Great Recession and become a multi-unit Anytime Fitness Club owner operator. So I've bought and sold 4 businesses. But what I have to tell people is that Why am I here? Because I want to engage your audience and help them to achieve what their American dream is. At my core, over 16 years of doing this, got to live my American dream. And I'm stoked about that and grateful for it. So now I'm just happy to engage with people on how they can do the same through what I'll call entrepreneurial business ownership. And after my last exit, I thought it'd be fun to write a book about it. It's called Grit It Done, Low Risk Guide to Entrepreneurial Success. You can get it at grititdone.com. Costs 99 cents through the end of May. And that's my life story.
Awesome, man, awesome. And I've seen those anywhere. That franchise kinda took off. It's what it reminds me of the Anytime Fitnesses remind me of kinda like the little markets that pop up in the little Dollar Generals and stuff that pop up in the little areas. The Anytime Fitnesses pop up in the middle towns all the time. So, uh, I don't know how many Anytime Fitness franchises there are today. I have to assume it's in the thousands.
Yeah, and I sold my very last one in March of 2022.
Mhm,
You'll appreciate it 'cause it's not too far from you in the great town of Winters, California, which if you haven't checked out yet, Ron, you gotta go to. I'm hesitant to say this. It's like the coolest under the radar town, I think, in all of Northern California. I owned a business there for 12 years, big fan. But yeah, Anytime Fitness clubs. And I think these opportunities have been gone for a number of years. But the
mhm,
bottom line is they do exceptionally well in small towns, as little as 4,000 people, quite frankly, where there's
mhm,
limited to no competition. So it's a great concept. Just merged with Orange Theory Fitness, actually. I think they
mhm,
announced it 2 weeks ago. So they got some, private equity money, maybe, I don't know, don't quote me on it, 10-ish years ago. So they've been work capital as a minority investment, and work has kind of pushed them to do some very interesting things. So yeah, great brand, certainly treated me well. But the fun part about Anytime Fitness and also with other endeavors I've been involved in, is so fulfilling, Ron, to open these clubs in small towns like Winners, we use that as an example. These towns, people are driving 20 minutes to get a workout in.
mhm,
And because of that, they're not achieving their goals. And you open a club like that, provide a good service, get super involved in the community, have the chance to improve lives. And half the fun, I mean, 90% of the fun for me about small business ownership is just the relationships that I make and the positive impact I can have on my team members and my customers as time goes on. Funny story, one of the best team members that I ever had the chance to hire with a fitness business, I was sitting in a coffee shop, really cool coffee shop. It's like where everybody in town hangs out, like the mayor's there. You can catch the gossip. You can kind of get everything going. And I go into the story in the book as well, but I'm in the coffee shop, just kind of listening to people and understanding what the town's really like. Cause I'm an outsider. Like, what do I know? And I'm sitting there. I'm actually at my laptop and I'm doing some calculations about tenant improvement costs and this and that. When out of nowhere, they grab my biceps. I look up and I was like, hey. And she was like, sorry to bother you. My name is XYZ. And I hear that you're the guy that's like looking at opening a club here in town. Is that right? And I'm like,
mm,
yeah, yeah. We got to go through some like permitting, but we're just about there. She's like, I want to be your first member. I'm really excited to sign up. So we kept the conversation going, and she ended up being, a club manager for me for 12 years
yeah.
until I sold the club. And also, even after the club is sold, we still have an excellent relationship. So one thing I think people don't always realize about being a entrepreneurial business owner is that you'll get the freedom and the autonomy if you do it right. You can certainly get those things. That's why I think a lot of people do end up doing it. But ultimately, the people that I have met along the process is really what drives that fulfillment, whether it be entrepreneurial employee team members like the ones that I mentioned, customers, fun podcast hosts that I meet in the process.
Yep.
Journey of small business ownership can be about the people so much.
But I was telling you before they hit the record button that my wife mentioned that she wanted to get into the food business, buy a food truck. My wife's one of these people who just isn't entrepreneurial by nature, and if you ask her what her goal was, she's not goal driven either. So my initial response was very poor and very horrible. My initial response was, "Your diet." She's like, "Yeah." I said, "You want to do what?" And she's like, "Yeah, I want to do a food truck. You remember that guy you had on your podcast talking about the donut trucks? I think we want to do that." She said, "Caleb and I will run it." I said, "Sweetheart, you're diabetic and I'm overweight. We do not need to own a donut truck." I shut the whole idea down. And then I started thinking about this is the first time she actually like brought something to like that to me that it was very doable. She does arts and crafts and other stuff too, but like, this is really doable and this is something we could probably pull off. I was like, you know what? Why do I have to, why do I have to assume we're going to eat this stuff? Right? We can own something, build it and build a business around it without having to like taste every serving that goes out the door. So, but the reason I even brought it up is that's like my second sentence to her was like, we shouldn't be buying a food truck. We should be buying a damn gym. Like, we need to surround ourselves
Well,
with fitness, right? So,
yeah, it's funny. I looked at an acquisition, also in Northern California, the
mm,
LLC name for this fitness center,
mm,
three fat guys, comma LLC, and the three individuals, they definitely lived up to that reputation. So yeah, half the fun is figuring out what you want to name something,
yeah.
right?
Well, I think we're well on this path. So let's talk about you've done the so that was a franchise model. So you've done the franchise model. You did before the franchise, you were working in the kind of venture capital. So you got the startup model. And then I know from reading your bio and some other stuff, you actually done some industrial stuff too. Was that on the franchise side or was that non-franchise?
On the investor side, it's been on both. What I'm happy to do is because I've been lucky enough to have my own capital to invest, is that mainly for people that are down and willing to sign the SBA personal guarantee for a 7A loan, and they need help filling that equity gap, sometimes because they don't have the money to do it. Although I tell people just you can scrap and find family and friends. I'm happy to fill that equity gap. So I do some investing around that. In addition, I think that a lot of operators are really smart, even if they have the money to have 100% ownership, to give up some of that ownership upside, some of it, not all of it, but some of it for individuals that can help mentor and coach them through the process. Business ownership can be lonely. When I was multi-unit anytime fitness club owner, I had the franchisor and I knew a lot of club owners around, and I would always dress up in that purple superhero suit for their grand openings or this and that. I mean, it was fun. But what I really lacked, Ron, is I lacked a group like an EO or a YPO or that right community for me. So I ended up going to business school to find that. And I have no
Mm,
regrets about business school. Went to Chicago booth. It was absolutely fantastic. Had some life altering events there for me in the acquisition space. But I always do wonder if I'd had a good peer group of advisors around me, what ideas might have come out of the fact I was a multi unit club owner with excellent cash flow and full
mm,
freedom and everything like that. It's just interesting to think about what those counterfactuals would be. So big key takeaway, I go into it in the book a lot, and I just can't stress it enough. Both when you're searching for a business to buy and when you operate the business, find the right peer group to do that with. If you want to have an extra challenge and you like loneliness, I don't know anyone that does, but maybe you do, then do this alone.
yeah,
But do a lot of diligence on that. And don't just my guidance is don't just join the first one that you see, but talk to a bunch of them. There's a lot of them out there. A lot of people that teach this, a lot of conferences. There's a lot of MBA programs if you want to go that route. But really take the time to try to find that right peer fit. Because if you are able to, oh, the sky is the limit for what those relationships can end up doing. And I've experienced it and I've seen it happen to others as well. It's one of those things where the possibilities truly become endless. I know you do networking as part of your podcast, you get one together. I mean, that stuff is just great. And go to
yeah.
as many of those as possible. It's like a critical part of diligence and operating. So want to be careful with that.
Yeah, I do. We do that twice a month. It's free, and I do it to meet the, listeners, and we have a lot of times the, guests like yourself will pop into those. So usually there's about 25 to 30 people show up. We do them twice a month, and, not heavily promoted, but it is on LinkedIn and on Meetup, so but it's usually listeners and 1 or 2 of the, previous, hosts. So I've had some really cool people show up too, like some really high-end authors and stuff show up in there and hang out with us and answer questions. I do that for which exactly what you said. As an entrepreneur, like, if I have an epiphany in the middle of the day, I can't call my wife because my wife still does work a full-time job. That's where we get our benefits and dental and vision and all that stuff. We always wherever we live, we find the place that has the best benefits, and that's where she goes to work, right? I can't call most of my friends are either at work because they have a job, like all my old military buddies and stuff I still stay in contact with, or they're other entrepreneurs and they're busy trying to run their daggone business during the day. So it is very lonely of you, like, in the realm of especially when you're in between, like, I don't have 30 employees right now. I'm running a couple of small things that are just a few people. So having that peer group and that people you can and I participate in more than just mine. So I go to about 3 of those a week, where I go sit in with other entrepreneurs and I take an advisory role or a peer role, and I'm just one of the peers. So it is critical, I think, you're surrounding yourself with people in this space and people who are even the people that are one step behind you. Like I was looking at your profile, you do some adjunct professoring and stuff. That's inspiring too. I did it a little while, about 2 years I did adjunct professoring. What do you find when you are around people who are trying to get into the space, but not quite there yet?
Yeah, I find a couple things. One is that validated exactly what you said. The fun part about being a teacher is that the students push the teacher to get better. It is fantastic. In order to teach something, you have to know it really well. So, students that are out there listening to this, the burden is on you. Come prepared to class, do the hard work, because then you're going to level up the existence for your teacher as well. And I cannot stress enough that it is enjoyable to teach when the students are engaged. And I'll do my part to give energy and give my experience shares and share my story and share the stories of others, but bring your A game. And that's how you can create these special containers
Yeah.
in the classroom. And also talk about the peer groups. These classes that I teach, right? I always tell people, you don't realize the power of the peers that are around you right now. These connections can matter so much. Like, talk to me, that's fine. I'm here for you. Reach out. But engage with your classmates. Let's build a special container here. When I was doing diligence on a business that I bought some years later, an industrial services business, one of my classmates from business school, we TA'd the very first class at Chicago booth on entrepreneurship through acquisition, which, by the way, Ron, this is 2015. Building curriculum from the ground up on on anything is difficult, but to a group of Chicago booth students, I mean, this has turned into like a 40-hour a week endeavor. Great relationship with the TA and the two first-time adjuncts that was just transformational for me, and it inspired me to go out and buy another business after business school. But, since I did that, that's where I really got the intrinsic drive to say, "You know what? Once I've been not that I wasn't successful with the fitness clubs, but once I attain a level of success like these 2 professors have, which I would argue I've done now, I wanna go back and teach this." So teaching is fantastic, and I'm blessed and honored that I have the opportunity to do it and to be able to see the impact that the class that has on the people that I'm able to teach is just is great. And we have a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun in the process as well. But last thing I'll say, what I've also learned is that you have to know 1% more than the students, just 1% more. That's it. As long as you're on that, you're set and good to go. And no joke, I recently got invited, this was maybe 2 or 3 months ago, to do a panel on entrepreneurship through acquisition. So I was on an investor panel, a pitch competition for high school kids. So it was the first high school pitch
Wow.
competition in ETA that I'd ever seen at a university or at a school out in Cleveland. And I got to tell you, these kids, I give them a 10 out of 10. They talked about the traditional stuff we hear about all the time. I want to do a roll up in the HVAC space. Cool. That's awesome. But some of the unique businesses I'd never even heard of. One group found a company that collects golf balls that are in lakes at golf courses. I had no idea, and I know a lot. I mean, I see like unique companies all the time. I had no idea that a company like that even existed. They broke down the major players in the space, the fragmentation. And it's just like a group of 17-year-olds. I was like, wow. So it's very cool to be inspired by students. So students out there, if you ever take one of my classes, the burden is on you to come prepared, drive that engagement. That is how you'll get a ton out of it as well. And by the way, being on your podcast right now, it's the same thing. You mentioned the podcast is all about the guests, right? To me, the podcast is all about the audience out there. And I want to make sure that I bring my A game so I can make it as easy as a process it is for
Yeah.
you to get value to the audience out there.
So let's go back to you mentioned you admired what was that, an industrial servicing company? What is that?
Oh, it's the best kind of business, Ron. It's the dirty work that keeps the country running. So it's things like grease trap pumping, kitchen hood exhaust cleaning, factory maintenance, duct cleaning, Vector trucks, catch basins, you name it, this company did it. Absolutely fantastic business. Bought it with my own equity and levered up with a very big SBA loan. It really hit all the criteria that I look for in businesses and I coach people that I teach and invest to. Fragmented customer base, recurring revenue, pretty stable. I mean, stable management team. There's definitely CapEx in the space because you got pumper trucks and Vector trucks, but very
Mm,
manageable as well. So yeah, just really hit. And there's a lot of tools out there, scorecards that can be used to analyze businesses. I have my own, call it the double diamond. It's in the book. You can, find it on the website. You put in your email, all that good stuff. It works really well for me. So I encourage people to check it out or find a tool that you have. And this business just hit super high on all those tools. So moved across the country to the Midwest, bought it. It was already a great business when I bought it. I grew it through the pandemic. It was an essential business. They relied on food service a lot. Actually, more than half the business was food service, but still managed to significantly grow it through the pandemic. It was high margin when I bought it. It was higher margin when I sold it. So revenue, EBITDA margins, headcount, whole nine yards. Wanted to sell it. So debating if I wanted to sell it to a strategic acquirer or to an ESOP. I'm very big on employee ownership, and this is a dirty business. So I think the people that are doing that kind of dirty work should be the owners of it. I got an ESOP approved through credit with an SBA lender for a 7A deal, which no joke, Ron, no joke, would have actually improved cash flows to the business, even though the interest rates were higher and the loan principal was higher as well because the business was worth more than when I bought it. But because with ESOPs, and again, if you hate taxes, you'll love ESOPs. It's the only debt instrument that I know of, and maybe one of your listeners or guests could correct me, where both the interest and the debt itself are tax free. So I had this cool ESOP deal set up. I couldn't pull the trigger on it because I didn't, even though I could monetize the governance cost of an ESOP, because I thought, hey, you literally have to have someone who's going to be in charge of the ESOP as a full-time job, call it 80K a year. You got to pay the annual valuations. I just could never get comfortable with the board and the governance structure of it. I thought it would just slow the business down too much. So long story short, I figured out the present value of what employee ownership would be worth to the team members. Then I went out to a strategic and I basically did it. I proposed a price to them that was the same of what I would have gotten out of the ESOP when I adjusted for taxes and just my like personal cash flow out of it, which was going to
Mm.
be a solid exit. Then I figured out what the present value of what I thought employee ownership was worth. And I asked them for an increase of price where I could pay the team members cash retention bonuses that were the same discounted monetary value of ESOP ownership. And I did that. And
Awesome.
ultimately, the deal closed at that price, even though I grew the business a lot from signed LOI to close time. And it was also nice because we all know that closing a business is a quack. Like people always think that like selling a successful business is going to be easy, right? You think it'd be like a victory lap. Heck no, it's a quagmire and a half, right? But it was really nice for
Yeah.
me because the entire time I had this ESOP that I was just like almost I was literally like, I could do this, I could do this. So I always had a really viable alternative. So if
Mm.
challenges came about, I was just ready to move. So great experience. But again, the best part of it for me is that I didn't need to do this. I look at it as a working on the business versus in the business activity because it's such a dirty technician driven business. If you knew me before I bought it, Ron, I'm the fitness kid from California. I didn't even know, no joke, I didn't know what mechanically inclined even meant. Like, let that sink in for a second. Let that sink in for your listeners. I didn't know what mechanically inclined even actually meant. And I was searching mainly at this point in businesses and fitness and franchising. I think that they're great spaces and I knew a lot about them. But I also kept 20% of my search open for opportunistic things that would come up. And this was one, it was a brokered deal from a generational, but I didn't know anything about the space. But when I bought it, I was like, I'm gonna get out in the field. I'm gonna get my CDL, and I'm gonna do that one so I can build the kind of culture I want to, and B so I can be a better leader, and C because I think that in order to really be effective in a business like this, I can crush it if I have that like spend time in the field when I need to. So I had a ton of fun doing that. Ton of fun just doing some of the what I'll call the people projects with individuals that I really invested in, whether it be helping them get driver's licenses or getting their own CDLs or getting more certifications and things like that. Help one guy file his unpaid taxes, which is a whole interesting thing to go through. So it was just fun in that business. Like the people projects and getting out in the field was completely the fun part of it. And I also think that it's why ultimately I was able to do so well in that business. Because, for example, I bought the business and all the scheduling. This business was doing it was doing a little bit less than $1 million in EBITDA, right? When I bought it. So this is and I had to bid against strategics to win the deal, right? So this is in a very good business. All the fundamentals just I mean, there's challenges, but the fundamentals were good. But I think a reason I was able to be successful with it is because, like, for example, when I want to take the business from pencil and paper scheduling, right? And to the cloud, and there's all kinds of field service options out there. I wanted to know exactly what that was gonna feel like and be like for the technicians so that the transition was successful. So I think it's important that working when you wanna sell a business, it's critical that you are redundant, right? You don't need to be there. So it's always critical to make sure that you're working on the business and not in the business. But in this industrial services firm, I think that working in the business was working on the business at the same time. So it was fun to go through. So that was May 2022 when that business got sold. Strategic's happy, all the retention bonuses got paid. I'm happy. And then, since that point I've been investing. That's when I started teaching. That's when I started writing the book. And I also, because I like challenges, I'm working on a Ph.D. at Case Western Reserve University, which will be done in 2 years, where I'm basically studying entrepreneurship through acquisition. And the lens I start with it at is I don't think anyone had ever talked to sellers before of successful businesses about if they were satisfied with their sale or not. And I'm not talking about selling I'll joke, selling the food truck that was you didn't really enjoy, but businesses that are making at least 500K of EBITDA. And most of these businesses are making in the millions. So I did some cool qualitative work, which I'm building on now about what drives satisfaction for business sales. And I got to tell you, and I analyzed about 32 transactions, 30 sellers. Really, really, really cool stuff that came out of that. So, bottom line, I'm just like a small business enthusiast. I think that 43.5% of the US economy is GDP is from businesses of less than 500 people. And the amount of, I think, attention that gets is just not enough, right? So I'm just very passionate about the space overall and trying to teach and empower people to get into it. And by the way, what institution, Ron, do you think Americans have the most faith in most confidence in rather of any US institution?
Um, I'm not even sure. The SBA, maybe? I don't know. Guessing.
Yeah.
Hey there, How to Exit family. Today, I'm thrilled to talk about Snowball, our incredible new sponsor. This community is more than just an investment hub. It's a place where growth is holistic. A private community where top entrepreneur investors share private deal flow, wins, tough lessons, strategies, get advice, and so much more. Snowball is a network rich with like minded, experienced entrepreneurial minds, including investors, founders, CEOs, and doers, all dedicated to meaningful growth. Snowball threads are like a daily masterclass. This isn't just about financial success, it's about enriching your entire life. If you're looking for a community that supports your entire entrepreneurial journey with shared wisdom and collective support, check out www.snowballclub.com. I believe their approach to compounded growth in wealth, health, network, and relationships could be the game changer you've been seeking. Let's grow together with Snowball.
Yeah, you're close. You're close. No joke. Gallup polls Americans every summer,
Mhm.
and it has consistently been small
Okay.
business as an institution. 65% last year. Religion gets 32%. Congress gets 8%. And small business has been the highest pretty consistently for, I'd say, 10 plus years. So I joke, it's like you're to be the most popular person. Okay. I tell you that if you follow the steps in the book or and you get the right education and you're thoughtful with it, you can minimize your risk relative to the alternatives. You're gonna have great freedom, great autonomy. You're gonna potentially be able to help some people in the process. Also, as I know you can appreciate and a lot of your other guests and listeners can, the pile of paperwork in a small business is like this high. So you see how the sausage of our great country is made. And I think it certainly made me a heck of a lot more civic minded. So I just view this opportunity as a great thing that everyone should at least consider doing when the time is right for them. And we can talk about the silver tsunami and the demographic changes that exist for acquisitions and supply. There's a lot of companies, there's a lot of buyers as well. But I really think that this is a great option for people to do. And not just for the people, by the way, that are looking to buy like a $2 million EBITDA business, but take the average American who's making $1,118 a week in wages, and let's gross it up to 70K a year with benefits and the such. I would tell you, my opinion is that if that person goes out and levers up with an SBA 7A loan and they buy a business making 500K a year, and of course they got to have some equity to put into it, right? And if they get investment, that's going to dilute them. But if you do that and assume no growth, just assume it stays stable, they're gonna make more money while they own it. They're gonna have I would tell you, if they do some smart things and they spend time in the business, then eventually they can get to a point where the business works more for them than they do for the business. They're gonna make more money. They're gonna have more autonomy and freedom. They're also, again, gonna be able to improve some lives, become more civic minded. And at year 10, Ron, when the SBA debt's paid off, even if they don't grow it at all and they bought it for the multiple that, or they sell it for what the multiple they bought it at, it's going to be like a 7-figure exit in some way. So I just think that every individual should have this on their radar screen at some point in their career. So that's why I get inspired about, and it's kind of why I'm having conversations like this right here,
Yeah.
because I do a lot around this stuff, but I really think there's no problem for people trying to buy a great business. There's a lot of good opportunities for, yeah, for businesses that I think are still to an extent off the radar.
Let's talk a little bit about something you brought up there. You've surveyed 30 something exits. I've interviewed over 200 people. Some of them were exits, some of them were, a lot of them were advisors and people like you who have exited in the past. What are some of the aha moments of those? What satisfied them in the exit and what did they regret? I because when I first started it, you asked if you'd asked me on day one when I took and hired a mentor, I bought a company, then I hired a mentor to teach me how to buy companies because I did it wrong. Yeah, I did the same thing you did though. When I bought it, it's like I bought that pest control company. First thing I did is we had some
Yeah.
liability issues with the previous owner. I was like, I can't write on his shirt tail at all. We were gonna hang our title or our licenses on him because he was gonna kind of semi-retire and let us do that. But he wasn't doing things right. So I was like, no, 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 no. So we ended up just getting the equipment and some of his customer list, which was anyways, that's another story. But I went out and got all the licenses and I've never touched a chemical in my life. I don't want to. My guys do that, but I wanted to know what it was and what I had to pass and what my guys had to do.
Yeah.
So I went and took all
Yeah.
the tests.
Yeah.
I'm really good at taking tests so that I read something, I can pass the test. So I went and took all the, the 6 or 8 tests we had to take to have all the licenses, hung them on my hat for the first 2.5 years. And now there's somebody else doing that. That said, I, didn't want to hang that on there and not know what they wanted to do. So there's something to said about you getting your CDL and going on and driving the route a couple of times. I've tried those routing software too. If you're working blue collar, did you have to teach people how to use tablets and how to use electronics? Because that's one of the things I bought the routing software and had to teach my guys like, no, 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 this is how you use it. I had to show them how to use a tablet. So,
Yeah, no, totally. And the key is that, and again, I mean, of course they want you to buy tablets, right?
yeah,
But I was like, why would I buy a tablet? I'm going to go out and see if I can do this on my phone. Oh,
yeah,
well, just so you know, 90% of our customers don't do it on their phone. I get it. I hear you loud and clear. I want to try, right?
yeah,
So I went out and I would on my own just do it. And I would
mm,
come across the pain points with it. And you know what, those 10% of customers that are doing it on the phone, I want to talk to them. I want to know what's going on. So I think that again, in a business, it's all about doing, what Stephen Covey calls the quadrant 2 activities, what's important but not urgent. And I think it's just critical to understand what those priorities are for entrepreneurial business owners and then just ruthlessly focus on those. And that's where the results really get driven. Cause I believe that what gets focus gets done. And in the case of that business, field service management, I mean, I'm a booth guy, right? So part of me is very quantitatively driven. I could just see like 300 basis points of EBITDA margin. You know what I mean? Like right there, if we got this thing right. I could also see, by the way, negative 500 basis points of EBITDA margin if we got it wrong. But
yeah.
in a lot of the owner CEO groups I'm a part of, it's like so fun to see. I would tell you that most people, and believe me, we had our challenges in field service management too, particularly with the ones I was experimenting with. But so many times people, it takes them twice as long to roll it out, costs them twice as much, and they achieve half the upside. I mean, going to the cloud, it sounds easy in a business plan and it sounds easy to do. It's like, oh, a young person buys business and goes to the cloud, and they ultimately do. It is a quagmire to do though. And I've seen a lot of people spend a lot of money messing it up, which is why, by the way, I bought this business, profit margins were amazing, 45%, no joke. CapEx adjusted EBITDA margins were 45%. So it's good to buy. And I'm not saying buy a business without much profitability. I mean, there's just not that many out there. With that said, though, don't buy that business like you were talking about with the restaurants that has 3 to 5%. Because if you're an inexperienced operator, even if you're an experienced operator and you don't know the space, or even if you are an experienced operator and you do know the space, there's just things that I wanna say 100%, but I'm not. I'm gonna say 99.999%. Because one thing about academic studies is they gotta be scrutinized, right? So I gotta be careful what I say. Things are gonna come up that you don't know. You will probably make mistakes, and those mistakes are gonna eat into your margins. And you wanna have some fat there. So if you can make some mistakes, you can learn, you can become a better operator without putting you in a tough cash position. So that's one reason I always encourage people not to go for the low margin businesses. because you want to give yourself leeway as an operator.
I 100% agree. I don't look at anything I can't get to the 25 and above percent profit margin, and that cuts out a lot of businesses. And the reason is I'm human and I have flaws, and I want to, when you start a business, it's yours to figure it out. But when you acquire a business, it's yours to screw up. I need some leeway to learn, some tough lessons learned. So I 100% agree with that. Not all companies have that, but if you can hunt down, even in the industries where you think that we were talking about food services, even in industries where you think that's not possible, there are food industries out there that have high profit margins, right? It's typically your bakeries, sandwiches, pasta, things that are really low cost food cost and don't have seating where you have a bunch of waiters and waitresses that you pay hourly wages and stuff on. I want to go back to the thing. I started asking you a question, then I went off
Oh
on a
yeah, about
tangent.
the study.
Yeah. So based off your personal experience, because you've sold a few businesses and the study you've done, what do you think are the key things? And we have a lot of buyers listening to us. What are the key things that really move the needle on the seller's behalf that buyers should be aware of it and to work towards?
Yeah, so great question. So first and foremost, I would say that every seller is first and foremost different. They all have their own unique idiosyncrasies, and it's critical to have a relationship where you can understand what those are, and then you can make your offer, both the monetary side of it and the non-monetary side of it, geared towards that. So qualify the sellers. We are all people. We all have our own unique things, right? With that said, a couple interesting themes that came out of the qualitative study is one, in the low to no satisfaction group, a very common theme was being what I'll call blinded by the price. So, for example, buyer comes in and says, "You know what? I'm going to pay you 9 times EBITDA for this business." Whoa, don't Ron, this buyer has no idea what they're talking about. This business is not worth 9 times at all. I wouldn't pay 4 times for it. This is like, oh my God. I could do so much with that. Say it was making $1 million a year, but I could do so much with that extra 5 million. This is like the best. Awesome. Great. So you have that blinded by the price theme. What that is associated with is that because they're blinded by the price, they forget about those intangible things that actually mattered in the business. And so those transactions that happened with hindsight tended to be associated with the theme of having a high price come in and going with that deal because they thought that money could compensate. Now, I think that that's something that's some will find it surprising, some definitely won't find it surprising, but that was a very clear theme that came out of it. Second, which dynamically goes with blinded by the price is, and I want to preface this with a very critical word, competent, uses competent help. There's a lot of intermediaries out there. Some are fantastic. I mean, great. I would pay them 10 times the fees that I did. They're great. There's some in the middle, and there's some I think might do a better job if they were in a different career. I think the world would be better off for them if they were, right? The high sentiment transactions had competent help as part of it. And what I would argue is part of the causal link, which again, academic research is a different ballgame than practitioner research. So you actually have to prove things before you can say them. And academics, by the way, I'm careful what I say, they're very critical. They're very mean, right? They point out flaws. So I gotta be very careful what you say. But I think one hypothesized causal link is that if you have competent help, then true competent help will help you avoid being blinded by the price, and that will lead to more satisfaction from the seller on the back end. So those are kind of like two of the cool findings from it. One is that being blinded by the price, so getting a high price, can lead to lower sentiment on the back end, and then the using competent help. And with a competent help thing, it goes both ways. So many transactions in this study, and I won't talk about the ones outside of it, which I've been a part of. If you have the wrong help, it can function to either just completely kill the deal or
Yeah.
delay it. So a critical thing is that we're all going to make mistakes and we're all going to surround ourselves by the wrong people at time. I'll just speak for myself. I've made the mistake of surrounding myself by the wrong people in various aspects of my life, business, personal, whole 9 yards. I think a part of it that's not talked about a lot, which by the way, I'm moderating a panel at BYU tomorrow on ETA with a couple pretty big intermediaries in the space. And we're going to hit this theme really hard is what do you do if you have bad help around you in the deal that either it's your intermediary or it's someone else. How do you deal with that? Right. I think it's something that is not necessarily tied. It's always easy to be like, oh yeah, I found a great broker or an intermediary or a banker or whatever, and they're pushing the deal forward. But what do you do when you love a business? You have good rapport with the owner, but there's these incompetent intermediaries out. And it's so interesting to have done this study. And by the way, these studies are confidentiality is it's
Right.
100% guaranteed. It's like national defense work. It's like that scrutinized on privacy, which is really cool because the sellers will legitly tell you they'll tell you things they're not telling their wife or they're not telling anyone else. So you really get like the meat of it. But it's so interesting to see the road that those bad intermarriage relationships can take, both to prevent the deal, to slow it down, or to be issues that cause headaches afterwards as well. So I can't stress enough that doing it yourself is a fine option. Although people that did achieve the higher satisfaction levels tended to have intermediaries, believe it or not. So for any intermediaries on this call, be like, yes, it shows that intermediaries are a good thing, right? So
The
those that
right one.
achieve the higher, yeah, the right one, but the right one, absolutely. So I tell you that the framework is bad one or mediocre one's the worst. Having none is better than that. But if you can find that right one, that's where you're there. So find the right one that will prevent you from being blinded by the price. That's like the tentative framework that came out of this study.
I have a tendency to tell people what's on my mind. So there's been more than one time where I walked away from a deal and then I had a heart to heart with one of the intermediaries on the other side. Like the attorneys, a lot of times it's been the attorney. A lot of times people pick attorneys that have no business in M&A. It's their family attorney or the guy that set up the LLC has no business in it. I call them after, like after I've already said, yeah, this is a no go, and I tell them what I think. I just like I'm not rude and mean. I just like, look, you're not helping this person. You're hurting them. You have no business being in this deal, and you're going to kill this deal. Like, you have no knowledge of the space. You don't even know the right terms and terminology, and you're hurting your friend. You call him your friend. You said you've known him for 20 years. You're screwing him over. Get away from this deal. Make him go find somebody that knows what they're doing. I've done it to brokers too. I've had them more often than not. The brokers will hang up on me because they don't want to hear it. But I don't. I won't allow. I love my entrepreneur partners and friends in the world. I won't let an entrepreneur not hear that, and I'll even tell the entrepreneur that after at the end of the game. Like, "Hey, I'm not walking away because your business is bad," or maybe like, "Hey, this isn't a fit for me. It's not because you have a bad business or anything. You didn't do anything wrong. But I want you to know heart to heart, your advisor is gonna mess this over time after time after again. If you had a great advisor, I might put up with going a little further in this and see if we can correct some of the things that are roadblocks right now, but the combination, the stew, you've got a bad ingredient in the stew that just makes it taste so bad. I don't wanna see if I can flavor that out," right? He's gonna kill the deal.
Uh,
And I say it to the business owner, not I say, "Okay, I don't say anything to a human being that I won't say, to their face. I won't say anything to you or about you behind your back that I won't call you and tell you about." So I said, I don't want you to have this conversation with your broker, so I'm calling him, right? Just understand that he's gonna hate my guts after this, and he'll tell you never to do business with me. That's okay. He didn't burn the deal. It's just not gonna work. And a lot of times they don't wanna hear it, but I have to say what's on my mind. I've always said what's on my mind, and I'm gonna be honest with people. So what are some of the others? So we talked about
no, you,
rapport. Rapport is
yeah,
one, right? Earlier, we talked about that. We talked about the blindness of offer so big, I'm gonna overlook everything else. And then we talked about having the right advisor. What are some of the other findings?
yeah, absolutely. And I want to say two things to respond to what you said. So first and foremost, I'm both excited and fearful to ask you for feedback after this podcast, by the way, because you're going to call it how I see it. So I'm very excited. And
We
exactly what you
always do
said
it.
about, yep. Hey, good, better, best, right?
Yep.
And it also goes to something you said about teaching as well. It's like one bad student in the class can like ruin the entire class in the same way that one bad actor in a deal can ruin the entire deal. So it's
Yep.
interesting. Another fascinating fact about high seller sentiment is look at the journey of how the buyer, or excuse me, how the seller actually started their own entrepreneurial journey. So if they intentionally wanted to become a business owner, either through starting a business or through acquisition, then after the sale, they would just have no to low sentiment to begin with. Whereas those that on a binary level were more opportunistic in how they came about it, right? Maybe they lost a job or this or that, and that's what got them into it. They tended to have higher sentiment in the deal. So it's interesting when you look at what the psychological profile is and the history of the seller to understand that, you know what, in all likelihood, if this individual wanted to go down this path, they're just not going to be happier with the sale independent of any other factors. And if you're an intermediary, maybe you don't want to take on a client like that. And if you're a buyer, now you want to think, all right, well, this is the kind of thing where I literally want them to have like, I'm going to give them all cash and I want them to have a 1 month transition so that when they have that negative, depressed moment and they're not happy, they are not involved in the business in any capacity. So again, it's just so important going to the key takeaways, qualify the seller, understand their story, realize that it's easy to get focused on getting the deal done and getting across the finish line. But as all the research in this space, you read the Stanford Search Fund study, you talk to the hundreds of practitioners you've talked to, you listen to your podcast, transitions are tough and transitions can be a significant. I'd love to study transitions academically, by the way. I mean, there's so much stuff I'd love to study, but transitions can be rough and it can be bad. And it's a big reason that these deals underperform. So think about the seller even before you close a deal about how you're going to manage that, right? I mean, you want to think about the employees, obviously, but that relationship with the seller is critically important. So Ron, you get me fired up thinking about how
Yeah,
to kind of study that stuff. But yeah, so if they intentionally became an entrepreneur, intentionally became a business owner, they're just more likely to not be happy with the sale. So plan accordingly.
I love it. I'll tell you and I've taken 2 different mentoring, like, programs on it. I haven't been to an ETA program. I interviewed David Dotson in Stanford is not that far away. I asked him if I could, like, audit his course. Apparently, his thing at Stanford, like, do a sit-in. Apparently, he has a 2-year waiting list on his, and it's not too far. Otherwise, I know somebody that actually snuck into his course, and he knows it too. So I interviewed a guy who basically just walked in and sat in the back of the room as if he was audited, and they don't take roll in those or attendance because it's a big room. And he went through the whole program. He did that both there and I forgot what the other one was. Anyway, he went to 2 different ETA programs. He was just scrappy, he couldn't afford it, so he just showed up and sat in the back of the room, took notes for the classes, and took the programs. Not that I would recommend that, but it was pretty scrappy, he did it. One of the things I think a lot of these are missing is how important rapport is. I think you could actually give and that includes the negotiation. If you look at any of the top negotiations, they talk about how to build rapport. But any business situation, especially these acquiring these businesses, really getting the rapport down, getting to a relationship with the seller. In so many cases, you kinda need that seller to be on track, maybe even past that 30 or 60, 90 days afterwards, that 1 month, the 2 months afterwards. You need to be able to have deep enough rapport with them if something kinda goes sideways or you lose a major client 6 months down the road, you can call him up and go, "Hey, help me you might help me get this guy back on track." Rapport is the key to all this, and, not I honestly think you could do 2 or 3 a day. Like, if you had a 7-day program on teaching people how to buy businesses where they have to go to 4-hour sessions or whatever. If you did something, or an ETA program, I think you could do a third of it on just how to build deep relationships with individuals, because it's actually a
Yeah.
skill missing, especially in our youth. Like, my kids, I'm so worried about them. They spend so much time at a tablet. My son's finally got into the things where he's 13, he's just getting back in that stage where he played basketball. He's doing some boxing stuff at a public gym, and now he's of all things, he's got a little nerd in him too. He's doing a group D&D, Dungeons& and Dragons, but I love it because
Yeah.
he's actually interacting with real human beings again instead of being on his daggum Xbox, right?
No, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I can't hit this enough. Like small entrepreneurial business ownership is about the people. And the most fulfilling part for me has been the people. And I want to hit on David Dotson for a second, by the way.
Yeah,
You talk about someone who you want to have like in your corner on like a board or as an advisor. I mean, that's like the individual that you want. But I want to hit on a second thing about entrepreneurship through acquisition and buying small businesses. Dodson, okay, made his first amount of money in the septic grease trap pumping space, right? That was a long time ago. Fast forward to the year 2019, okay? I made a lot of money in like the grease trap septic pumping space. In entrepreneurship through acquisition, there's a very history can repeat itself with these businesses that are not sexy and not, growing 20% per year for the industry. There is great opportunities. So you don't always have to reinvent the wheel. Just take as a data point that you've had like 2 very successful exits among the same industry from like 2 individuals there. So I
yeah.
always like to point that out when David Dodson's around. And also too, you talked about trying to audit the class at Stanford, right? One thing is that this is also I don't talk about it quite as much, but another reason that I wrote the book is that people like a David Dodson would always do phone calls with me when I was
Mhm.
looking at buying businesses, right? They'd always take a 30 or 45 minutes. Sometimes I had to wait a month to get it, but they'd always do it. And it was so useful for me over the years. So I will always do it as well. If anyone reaches out, I'll always make the time for the call. What I find though is that about 90% of them just aren't a good use of their time or my time, because people just don't always, they're at such different levels and at in the process. Now, 1 in 10 of those are absolutely amazing. And I get so stoked when I get one of those great ones. But now what I tell people is cool, spend 99 cents. All right. By the end of May, buy this book. It
Hmm.
takes 3 hours to read. It's a quick, easy read. And then book the call with me. You're going to get so much more out of a call with someone like me or someone like a David Dotson or the other practitioners that are on this show. You're
Hmm.
going to get so much more out of the call if you are prepared for it, right? Because then
Yeah.
you can pick our brain in a way that is going to be so much more valuable. And we're going to want to like engage with you. We're going to want to invest in you. I'll be like, you know what? I want you to come take like a class with me. You're like the kind of student that I want. So
Right.
spend the time. If you want to talk to me, read the book, be prepared for these calls. Because again, I like MBAs. I got an MBA. I teach MBAs. I think
Hmm.
MBAs are great. But ultimately, this book is the most cost effective, time efficient first step for anyone going through this process. And it should lay the groundwork for what you decide is the next step, whether it be going to a conference, taking a course, getting an MBA, deciding you're like, I don't want to do all this work. This whole small business ownership thing does not seem like the right path for me. I want to just go back to my job at Google or 3M, wherever you're working. But that's, kind of something to keep in mind with as people think about, as your listeners think about what the right path forward is for them.
I often say things without realizing you've met me an hour ago and barely know me and don't know why I go to these things. I've got a master's degree. I got more education than the average fool should have, right? I got multiple degrees like you. I've got my MBA. I've taken more. I regularly pay for if somebody's got a 4-day course on ETA or something. I'll pay this 5 or 6 grand and I'll go take the course. And it's not because I think I need another course. I want to meet the people and they're doing it. I want to. These guys
Mm.
have networks, 2,000, 3,000. I was listening to a guy yesterday. It was in one of the mentors guys. His audience, is like consortium of people who's been through his course over the years, and the collection of people, there's almost 11,000 people. Those are resources. Those are people doing what you're doing. Those are potential JV partners. Those are potential investors. Those are potential guys that will answer questions. And I've rarely had an intelligent question where I can called somebody and they didn't want to help me answer it. So long as I prepared myself, like you said, I kind of know the individual. I'm calling the right guy. I know it's his bailiwick. And sometimes, sometimes they want to charge because that's just what they do if that's how they make their money. And sometimes they just want to help. Very often, more often than not, I've never seen a phone number I don't like. I'll cold call somebody in a heartbeat. Kind of how I got this podcast started, right? Is one of those, I want to learn more about this. I did it wrong. I took a couple courses. I still had questions. I'm just gonna interview some people, and the interviews were interesting enough. I think other people want to see this, so we started recording them. And now 2 years later, 200 episodes later, I won't ever quit this because I enjoy meeting people like been there, done that. I'll learn something from every one of these shows. And maybe someday when I hit the next zeros and I get to be a billionaire status or something, maybe this will be boring.
Mm.
I don't know. I don't think so. Matter of fact, I'm actually working on setting up a second podcast. It's called Fascinate Me if anybody's interested. But it's fascinate.me is where it'll be. It's just about stuff that I find interesting, right? It's random. Some of it's random. People who travel the world, climb mountains, just random stuff. But I'll probably continue doing this. I love that you got the book out. I love that you're actually helping this space and giving back. There's something to be said about being in service of other human beings. So that's what small business is about. And do you continue that after you've had a couple exits and quite frankly don't need to is brilliant and some says a lot about your character and who you are. So thank you for being here. We've covered a lot. Before we go, I want to do two things. First of all, somebody can only remember one or two things, maybe three. What would you want the key takeaways of today to be?
If you're not all in to being an entrepreneurial business owner, you are in the way. If you are not all in, you are in the way. Start out with the assessment part of it. Figure out, am I an employee? Am I an entrepreneurial or am I an equity employee? Am I a CEO? Am I a business owner or am I an entrepreneurial business owner? Understand what it is you want out of this endeavor, how much money you make. If you're willing to sign a personal guarantee, where you're willing to go, get the assessment done right. It's outlined in the book. If you're not all in though, you're in the way, and do not do yourself a disservice by going into this with only 1 foot in, because then only 1 foot is out. So that is simple. Second one is, which I think you're probably going to ask anyway, is where can you find me? Buy the
Yep.
book, grititdone.com, 99 cents at the end through the end of May. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so you can follow me there. I'm also getting active on X and Twitter. I looked at that community a lot when I've been operating from the sidelines, but now that I got a little more time on my hands, I'm having fun sending
Yeah.
some tweets out. So big fan of that community. So many just awesome dynamic personalities there. So I'll start playing around there more. And yeah, read the book. And then if you want to book a call with me, happy to do it. Just come prepared. I'm an Eagle Scout. So be prepared as a scout motto.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure we get all your contact information in the show notes, and that way people can reach out to you. And thank you for being here today. Hang out for just a minute. We'll call that a show.
Thank you.
I want to announce our new channel partners, the ITX Marketplace. Since 1998, ITX has created $5 billion in value by selling more than 225 IT businesses in 20 countries. ITX works exclusively with IT-enabled businesses generating between $5 million and $30 million who are ready to be sold, and M&A decision makers who are ready to buy. For over 25 years, ITX has developed industry knowledge that helps determine whether a seller is a good fit for their buyers before making the match. ITX Mergers and Acquisition Marketplace we have partnered with has a proprietary database of 50,000 plus global buyers seeking IT service firms, managed service providers, Microsoft service providers, software as a service platforms, and channel partners with Microsoft, Oracle, ServiceNow, and the Salesforce space. If you have an IT-enabled business you're ready to sell, I want you to visit the itexchangenet.com/marketplace, how to exit. That link will be in the show notes. Visit them now.